I did it. Great.
Yes, we
Okay,
see it.
excellent. Okay, great. Yeah, so of course, we're going to be talking about Save Our Signs, which, if you haven't heard of it, is a crowdsourced research project mobilizing community members to capture and preserve photographs of educational signs and displays in our national parks that are at risk of being censored or destroyed. And so we'll kind of start with our project goals. We have kind of three main goals that we're working towards. Number one, to raise awareness of ongoing censorship and erasure, and draw attention to the rich history and scientific knowledge that's held at NPS sites. Also, to build a public database that's publicly accessible of at-risk educational materials at national park sites before they can be erased or altered. And then three, to give people a tangible action that they can take to showcase their agency amidst increasing authoritarianism. So we'll do a little bit of background on how all this got started. But of course, I'm sure you are all very familiar with these executive orders, especially that were coming out right away back in January 2025. And so then this particular executive order was from March 2025. It's called Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. And this is the one that specifically discusses the national parks as well as the Smithsonian. And so in the text of the order, it instructs the Secretary of the Interior, which oversees the National Park Service, among other bureaus, to, quote, ensure that all public monuments, memorials, statues, markers, or similar properties within the Department of the Interior's jurisdiction do not contain descriptions, depictions, or other content that inappropriately disparage Americans, past or living. There's a lot to unpack there. We don't need to go into all the language, but obviously this is very alarming, and so we knew that we had to act. So our team is made up of social science librarians, data experts, and public historians. Our public historian colleagues are from a group called Mapping Prejudice, which is a research project that's housed in our university libraries here at University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And their project uses crowdsourcing to map racial covenants that were placed on property deeds to restrict anyone who wasn't white from living at that place. And then to build our team, we also connected with librarians and data experts from the Data Rescue Project. They are a national network engaged in preserving at-risk federal data sets. They're doing some really amazing work, and so we've been really lucky to have so many great people working on this project with us. I won't read all of this word for word, there's a lot, but there we have a bit of a project timeline here. It can't show everything that's happened over the last year and a half, but these are some of the major events that have happened in kind of the timeline of censorship in the parks and then also in our Save Our Signs project development. So, we wanted to highlight that on January 20th, 2025, there was another executive order that, again, I'm sure you're familiar with, defending women from gender ideology. And so that led to censorship across government information of all different types, websites, data sets, images, etc. One of the many direct results of that order was that on February 14th, the NPS removed the word transgender from the Stonewall website, and then also removed the T from the acronym LGBTQ+, and references to the word queer were also removed. It's hard to imagine how you can tell the story of Stonewall without the story of trans folks, but here we are. On March 27th, as we mentioned before, that was the executive order that specifically targeted national parks. May 20th, that is when a secretarial order was issued. It has the same name as the executive order, Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. And so that was operationalizing the executive order for the Department of the Interior. So it was basically giving the instructions to the Department of the Interior, to the National Park Service, on how they would go about replacing that inappropriate content. One of the things that they instructed staff to do was to put signs with QR codes at every single national park site so that visitors could report materials. And those signs have popularly been called snitch signs. On July 3rd, that is when our project launched. And then on July 23rd is when the first sign was censored that we know about at Muir Woods. And that was a case where they removed kind of like a sticky note or like an additional timeline that had been part of a like interactive experience that rangers did with park visitors that was providing context to the history of that site about Indigenous history, the NPS founders' connections at that site to eugenics, and also the role of women in preserving Muir Woods. And that content had originally been developed in 2021 as part of this living exhibit. And so that has been removed. Then on October 13th, that is when we were able to launch our first set of photographs from the SOS archive. So we started with 10,000 photographs that had been submitted from folks all over the country. But of course, signs continued to be removed. And so we continued to ask the public to submit photos. And spoiler alert, we continue to ask you to submit photos today, even, and ongoing into the future. In January, then on the 22nd, the President's House site was censored, which was incredibly disturbing. And the President's House site has really kind of become the epicenter of this campaign of censorship. And we'll talk more about that in our presentation. But briefly, all 34 interpretive panels at the site were removed. And these panels describe the lives of the 9 people that were enslaved by George Washington at that site during his presidency.
And that is Independence, everybody.
Yes, Independence National Historical Park in Philadelphia. Yeah, and then March 2nd, there was an NPS data set that was leaked that listed all of the materials that were flagged by NPS employees for review and possible removal. Then on May 22nd, there was a data set of all of the public comments that were released as part of a FOIA request, and that was from those snitch signs. So all the comments that people submitted from the snitch signs are now public because of a FOIA. On June 12th, as part of one national lawsuit, a district court barred further removals of signs around the country and required materials to be replaced to their original status as of May 2025. And then on June 17th, as part of that same lawsuit, a partial spreadsheet of confirmed removals was released, which helped us and, of course, others in the community identify more signs that had been replaced. And we'll kind of talk more about that in a bit as well. But this lawsuit is still ongoing and contested. And then finally, on July 15th, following a series of back and forth court rulings for a second lawsuit in Philadelphia, all the panels at the President's House were replaced with sanitized versions overnight on the 15th, which was just last week. So there has been an absolute fire hose of developments over the last year and a half, I guess. But we're doing our best to keep track of it and still asking people to collect photographs and signs. In terms of just the nuts and bolts of this project, the way we kind of got everything started is we created a photo submission form for volunteers to use. It's built with a Qualtrics survey so that participants can be anonymous. And we also really leaned into our partnerships at the Data Rescue Project to spread the word on social media because they have a big presence there. So here's one of their posts. Linda Kellum is one of the Data Rescue Project steering committee members. She says, "That bear is not friend, but he really wants you to help." So I thought that was very nice. We're also have been really lucky to get really good coverage from journalists around the country, some of whom have been able to tell stories about local parks that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So that's been really important too. So word quickly spread through major news coverage like the New York Times and NPR, Washington Post, and of course local news outlets. And so, like I mentioned, in October, we launched the archive that has 10,000 photos. And then as of today, we have received over 15,000 photos. And we collect photographs of all different kinds of signs and displays. So you can see quite a variety here in these images that all come from the archive. And we also collect photos of censorship, such as blank spaces where signs used to be. So this is an image from the president's house in Philly. And photographs of community creative resistance, such as protest art at sites where signs have been removed. And so this is also part of the SOS archive. So anyone can view the archive on our website. Here's a screenshot so you can kind of see what that looks like. They're sorted by park, and you can download the data. That includes then the date and the title of the image and all the information we have for each sign. And then in addition to the archive itself, we've created a number of tools that help folks kind of understand and keep up with what's going on. And so this is a screenshot from our website where you can click then on some of the different tools, the main ones that we've kind of got highlighted here. And so we'll talk through a couple of them. First, we maintain a SOS censorship tracker. And as of today, we know of 103 signs that have been removed at national park sites. And so this is a map, an interactive map that you can go in and click on the dots and learn more about each site. And then another tool that we've created is a story map of that internal data set that was leaked back in March that I mentioned. And that revealed a list of all the signs and materials that were under review and might be removed. So they're kind of high risk, right? If they haven't been removed yet, they could be. And so people can use this story map along with our archive to identify those at-risk materials that we might still need photographs of. Our newest story map is called SOS Censorship Report, How History is Being Erased in DC. On June 17th, as part of a lawsuit, the NPS released that spreadsheet that I mentioned. That was like a partial spreadsheet of things that had been removed. And when that became public, some of us on the SOS team happened to be in DC for a conference. And so while we were there, we used the new spreadsheet that was issued as well as our archive, and we went on a sign quest while we were there. And we actually found 4 different signs that had been modified in such a way that you probably wouldn't notice if you didn't know that this was happening. And so we created a story map that will kind of visualize that for folks to help them see. And so this sign that I've highlighted on the screen is from the Belmont Paul Women's Equality National Monument. I picked this one because I thought it might be of interest to all of you. The changed portion of the sign is in the very middle of the paragraph. There's like 2 sentences that have been changed. And so it used to say, while imprisoned, the women were beaten and force-fed when they went on hunger strikes. The ensuing publicity changed public and congressional opinion. The new sign does not include those sentences, and instead, it now
Oh,
reads, the women, many of them who came from prominent and politically connected families, demanded to be treated as political prisoners. So not only is this language shifting or attempting to shift the blame onto the women prisoners themselves, but it's also erasing the fact that publicity changed public and congressional opinion and led to changes in our society. So that is an interesting change that they made without much fanfare. So now I will pass things over to Molly to share more about what's been happening in Philadelphia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenny. So I'm going to spend most of the rest of the presentation just talking about this one site, Independence National Historic Park in Philadelphia. And the reason for that is, as Jenny noted, as of now, we know of at least 103 signs across the country that have been censored. Um, but the executive order and the secretarial order calls out just one NPS site by name, and it is this site, the Independence National Historic Park. Historical park. And in particular, there's a fixation this administration has on the President's House exhibit. So I'm going to be talking about that. I do just want to quickly note that while the President's House exhibit has been really the center of all this attention, there are also some other parts of the park more broadly where censorship has been reported as well. Next slide, please. So I want to go back in time a little bit and tell the history of this site, which some of you may be aware of, but if not, it's kind of a remarkable story. So in the year 2002, a number of Philadelphia residents who were led by a group called the Avenging the Ancestors Coalition began to advocate that the president's house, which is located in this park and is where Washington and Adams lived during their respective presidencies, start to tell the story of the 9 individuals who were enslaved by George Washington and lived at that site. Um, this activism went on for years. And in 2010, thanks to this activism, a new exhibit opened entitled The President's House: Freedom and Slavery in the Making of a New Nation. And on the walls, for those of you who haven't been there, of this site, until just last week, you could see a number of interpretive panels, artwork, and videos that told the story of all the people who lived at this site. And in addition to telling the stories of the 9 individuals who were enslaved by George Washington, the site really invited visitors to grapple with the central paradox of US history, which is, of course, that this is a nation founded on the ideals of liberty, also founded with the violence of slavery. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about just sort of what went into that site. Next slide, please. Oh, and so going forward in history a little bit, in January of this year, as Jenny noted, all of the panels at the president's house were just removed. And so all of these panels that kind of told the story of the 9 individuals who lived there were completely erased. A couple things that I just want to note about what was on those panels. One of the most famous ones that has been removed, there's a picture of here, like was entitled Life Under Slavery. And in a minute, I'll share where you can find some like pages we have on our website where you can look at the text in more detail because it's a pretty rich text. Um, this particular panel goes into detail about what slavery actually entailed. So it talks about the role that physical violence, sexual violence, family separation, the denial of literacy all played in slavery. All of that information has now been removed from that site. And another thing I just want to note about these panels is that they really invited visitors to also explore historiography and think about how violence in history shapes what gets left in the archive and whose stories get told. It brings up the fact that enslaved people of African descent were denied the right to learn how to read and write, and that shapes how we tell the history. So it's really this exhibit that's inviting the public into the conversation of what is the American story and who gets told. Um, January 22nd of this year, all of those signs came down at once, but that was just the beginning. Next slide, please. So here's some pictures. I do want to note that the employees took them down in broad daylight. So we have pictures of this happening on January 22nd of this year. And you can also watch videos of them being taken off the wall. Next slide. So the good news is the people of Philadelphia and the leadership in Philadelphia immediately sprang into action. The city of Philadelphia co-manages the park along with NPS, and they immediately sued the Park Service to restore the signs. As Jenny noted when she was going through the timeline, there's currently 2 lawsuits that are ongoing. So this is the one that is specific to the city of Philadelphia. The other one is a national lawsuit. That's the one where most recently Judge Angel Kelly said signs have to go back up, and that's now there's a back and forth around that. But going back to this one in Philadelphia, immediately Mayor Sherrill Parker and others filed a lawsuit. And in addition to this lawsuit, the people of Philadelphia sprang into action right away. Every single day, I believe, since these signs have been taken down, people have shown up and posted these like homemade signs that say things like history is real. In some cases, they have printed out what the sign text used to read and then like scotch tape them or put them up on the wall so that people can see what's originally there. We saw an Instagram video of a man that came to this site every day and just read out loud what the removed panels had said so that tourists and visitors would know what history is this government trying to erase. On February 16th, we had a moment of hope when the U.S. District Court Judge Cynthia Roof, who was an appointee of George W. Bush, ruled in the city's favor and said that the signs needed to go back up. The next day, NPS filed an appeal, and by basically February 20th, about half the signs had been back up. So we were hoping for the best. Next slide, please. The next development I want to note is that on April 9th, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported that the NPS website had posted the new signs that the Trump administration wanted to replace, and now, in fact, has replaced the original panels with. And this is just one example here. All of the context I just talked about what slavery actually entailed, the brutality of slavery has been removed. And here's just one section of a panel. The proposed panels note that while slavery was an odious and pernicious affront to the glorious rule of liberty, they also reassures all of us that Washington had mixed feelings about slavery, and also informs visitors that people who were enslaved at the president's house had a greater amount of quote unquote autonomy. So just take a second to think about the fact we're describing enslaved people as having autonomy, right? I mean, this is just a remarkable amount of whitewashing. We have a link right here, and Jenny, if you could go to the next slide, where if you want to kind of explore this in more detail, we invite you to look at the original panels and the proposed replacement panels. I will just note, we're not sure who authored these replacement panels. It's something I'm personally interested in. We know that Prager University and Hillsdale College were part of the Freedom 250 exhibits. I don't know if those groups had a hand in this or not. If anyone wants to help me dig into that, I'm curious. I'm certainly curious about who's crafting these narratives. All right, and then
Because
next
it's
slide.
clear that somebody knows some history.
Yes, and yeah, Cassie.
I don't know if he knows, but John Garrison Marks, do you know him? He wrote a book called Thy Will Be
Yes,
Done. So he has, I know he's
yes.
working on a piece for Atlantic right now. I was just in Philly. He just stopped at the site and
Mhm.
he works for AASLH. He may have information on, I can put his email in the chat, but he'd be the most likely person to know right now, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know I've been following his work, and that's super helpful. Thank you. Okay, and then here's unfortunately the conclusion of this, or at least the chapter we're at right now. Less than a week ago, early in the morning on Wednesday, July 15th, while it was still dark outside, the federal government replaced the panels that did still remain at the President's House exhibit with the whitewashed panels. So this includes all the panels that had previously been released by NPS, in addition to about a dozen more. That's what the Philadelphia Inquirer has reported. I will note right now, if anyone is in Philly or knows anyone who is, we at Save Our Signs would love a copy of those signs that were not previously released by the administration that have been put up. Because we know there are additional signs. We've seen glimpses of photographs of them, and some journalistic stories that have come up, but we're curious what the text of those has read. In addition to putting up these signs, the park police, which is not typically in Philadelphia, patrolled the park the next day, and they also put up a number. They basically put up security cameras, so they were surveying the area. I believe on July 15th, maybe 16th, you may have heard in the news, this woman, I may be mispronouncing her name, Sandra Shakar Krasnov, who's one of many concerned Philadelphia citizens who've been showing up. She was cited by park police for attempting to put up this homemade sign that read the 2007 evacuation. There was a archaeological dig at the site, which revealed where enslaved people had lived, revealed a kitchen and slave quarters below the president's house. She was cited for a fine of $305 for attempting to post this information that had previously been available to visitors on the panel on the walls. There's a great interview with her out there. She plans to go to court, so I think that'll be one to keep our eye on. So kind of the conclusion here is obviously the really, really bad news is that this incredibly powerful exhibit, which was made in collaboration between historians and the people of Philadelphia and a lot of grassroots community groups over the course of years between 2002 and 2010, has been taken down for this series of panels that have been imposed by this government. So we have this like sort of this opposite of like this community coming together to invite people to talk about whose history gets to be told, and we instead have the federal government coming in to say, here's how we're going to tell our history. And as the panels reveal, there's quite a lot of information that the government apparently views as a threat and does not want the public to be seeing at this site. That's the really bad news. The really good news, and the thing that has given me hope as I've worked on this project for the past year, is just how many people are fighting back. And that's one of the reasons I kind of went into some detail about what some of the people at Philadelphia are doing. And there are a lot of people out there who are ensuring that one way or another, whether it's by putting up their own signs or reading aloud what really happened or organizing within their communities, are making sure one way or another that all American history continues to get told in public spaces. And so then going to the next slide, I want to kind of go back to the early days of our project. This was almost a year ago today when we were just starting out trying to spread the word about this executive order and get people to take pictures of the signs. We weren't really sure how much we were reaching people, but one day we arrived at our mailboxes and we got this series of postcards from people who got together and wrote postcards just to reach out to thank us. And we have a few of just like a few quotes from them here. One of my favorite things that one of them said is this, the one in the middle: thank you for launching this project and giving people a way to get involved. This was a really meaningful one for us to receive because in addition to wanting to document the censorship, we also wanted to raise awareness of the fact that the national parks are a place where history gets told. I think a lot of people, not obviously nobody in this room, but in general may not realize just the huge amount of public history that is available to people for free at national parks. We wanted to raise awareness about that. And then we wanted to give people, as Jenny mentioned at the beginning, a tangible action step they could take, which I think is especially important at a time when so much is happening that it can feel overwhelming to figure out, okay, what's my small piece of action I can take to resist what this government is doing in terms of censoring information. And so we were able to give people that step. And so that continues to be our inspiration moving forward. And in terms of what's next, we are still collecting photographs. We want to see photographs. There's still original signs out there. There's so many signs in the National Park Service that we don't have. We're a small group based in Minnesota. There are sites all over the country. We would love your help collecting pictures of signs. We're collecting pictures of signs that people believe have been censored or altered, along with pictures of signs that you believe have not been. We are able to then add those to our archive, and that helps us track possible removals or censorship when it happens. And then, as I noted, we are also collecting photographs of protest art or creative resistance that people have put up in places like Philadelphia or in Acadia in response to censorship. We want to document that as well. And then we are talking to community groups, classes. We're just continuing to try to spread the word about our project to as many people as possible. And we would very much love your help in just spreading the word. We really do need all boots on the ground, capturing what's happening in these parks. And as Jenny kind of alluded to in talking about the signs that have been changed in DC, in some ways, when Jenny and our other colleague who went to DC took those pictures, that almost like alarmed me. Everything happening in Philadelphia is so terrible. But if you go to Philadelphia, maybe not today, but before July 15th, because of the community activism, you'll see evidence that that site has been censored, and you'll know that's happening. If you go to the 4 sites in DC where Jenny saw that language had been changed, an everyday visitor might not know that really important historical context was taken out. And so everything helps in terms of documenting this, because this administration really does want to keep what they're doing undercover. So with that, thank you so much for your time.